I played high school football, I played lacrosse, and I wrestled. There was never a place in all of my life where perfection was the standard anywhere more than in my high school band room. Now, I never had a chair thrown at me, but I certainly had one thrown in my general direction. I have had quite a few batons thrown at me, and my band director was a bit of a spitter. So if he had to yell at the trombone players in the back, I usually got spit on. Now, I played the oboe, which put me in the front row, which meant I got spit on, or if I got yelled at, which was quite often, if you've ever heard somebody learning to play the oboe, it sounds a little bit like a squawking chicken. I got yelled at quite a bit. And it was this feeling of perfection, that you had to be perfect. You couldn't make a mistake. We lived in fear. We practiced at home, not because we loved music and we wanted to be great, but we practiced at home because we were afraid of what would happen if we made a mistake during band class or band practice. It was hard being in high school band. The expectations were high, and the consequences seemed severe. So you might be asking yourself, why would you put up with that? Why not just quit? Why put yourself through that? Well, my high school band was one of the best bands in the country. We got invited to go all over the country to march in parades or do concerts. It meant something to belong to my high school band. It meant something, and people thought, in my high school, the band was actually the cool kids. I mean, I was in it. It meant something to belong to that group. And then graduation came, and I no longer belonged to that group. So I said, I'll take a month off. I'm not going to play my instrument anymore. I'm just going to kind of relax. I'm going to get away from that whole perfection. 15 years later, the last time I picked up my oboe was our last band concert. Why? Because when I don't belong to something anymore, there's no need to continue the behavior that made me a part of that group. A lot of times we like to think of behavior as being first. If you behave, that means you belong, and then you believe. But that's not really the way that it is. See, it's more like a circle. You see, you belong to believe, then you behave so that you can continue to belong. Now, if you remove one of these pieces, such as the belonging, there's no need to behave anymore. There's no need to do the things that are associated with being a part of that group. How many of you have ever wanted to belong to a group? Just raise your hand. Maybe it was a high school sports team. Maybe it was a band like me. Maybe there was a job that you applied for that you really wanted to be a part of. How many of you changed your behavior so that you could be a part of that group? It's tough when you want to belong. And sometimes we want to belong so badly that we behave in such a way that we actually are afraid of making a mistake for fear that we will no longer belong. It's that fear. When I was a kid, growing up, I had an older brother, and we used to misbehave a lot. Why? Because it's fun to misbehave. Mom gets you dressed up in your Sunday best, and it's just natural to want to go outside and roll in the mud, right? Because you want to misbehave. It's fun. Being all prim and proper all the time is not fun. It's kind of boring. So it's fun to misbehave. And when you're a kid, that's okay. It's kind of expected. You're going to misbehave because you're a kid. Oh, he's just a boy, right? He's just a boy. That's what boys do. Boys misbehave. My brother and I misbehaved. But then as you get older, you grow up. And then somebody along the line tries to ruin your childhood and say, hey, James, it's time to act your age. That's not fun. I don't want to act my age. I don't want to act 33. What do 33-year-olds do? They're boring. Not to mention 50-year-olds. Just kidding. I don't want to act my age. But we're told you better act your age if you want to belong. If you want to belong, you better behave. There's a little bit of fear in that. There's a fear that I won't belong if I don't behave. Now, when you're a kid, I believe that fear is a good thing. Fear keeps you safe. If I want to teach my daughter that she shouldn't touch a hot stove, I'm going to put fear into her heart. I'm going to put the fear of God. I'm not going to be like, well, let her do it one time and then it'll never happen again. That's true. That also causes fear, but I also don't really want her to have that pain. But I'm going to put fear into her. I'm going to teach her to be afraid of hot things. I'm going to teach her to be afraid of electrical outlets. I'm going to teach her to be afraid of boys. And I'm going to teach them to be afraid of me. But fear is not a very good motivator. You see, if you want to motivate people to go above and beyond, fear, you get the bare minimum. But if you want somebody to go above and beyond, it takes something more. It takes love. You see, fear demands behavior, but love motivates behavior. Last week, Pastor Bill brought in this concept of John chapter 13, verse 34 through 35. Let's go ahead and read this, and let's remember this. This is the command that Jesus gives to his disciples. He says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." Now, I want you to look here. I want you to think. Did Jesus say, love one another or I'm going to punish you? Jesus demonstrated the love and then says, as I have loved you, love one another. Jesus wanted his disciples to be motivated not by fear of consequences, but he wanted them to be motivated by the love that he had for them, and that was to dictate their behavior. We're in this series, 3 things. We look at thing 1. Thing 1 is fun. It's fun to belong. It's fun to belong. And thing 2, it's fun to even believe in something bigger than yourself. But it is very hard, especially when you're a little boy growing up, but even as we get older, it's very hard to behave. We're in Philippians chapter 3, and we're looking at Paul's instructions to us. Paul wants to show people what it means to be a follower of Jesus. He wants to teach them what it means to be a follower of Jesus, and he's bringing in his personal experience, his background. He's telling them where he's come from, the places that he's belonged, where he belongs now. He's trying to get them to see that it's not about their past, but it's about where God is taking them in the future. He's teaching them these 3 things. We pick up the story in Philippians chapter 3, verse 12. And Paul has brought us along his faith journey, and he's talked about where he was when he was a high-ranking Jewish person and how he gave all of that up to belong to something new because he believed in Jesus, and that affected his behavior for the rest of his life. And Paul tells us in Philippians chapter 3, verse 12, not that I've already obtained this. And he's talking about that perfection, that Christ-likeness. Not that I've already obtained this or am already perfect, but I press on to make it my own because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Paul belonged to something new. He believed something new, and that affected his behavior. When we think about belonging, belonging is not about who you are, but belonging is about whose you are. Now, if that was grammatically incorrect, I apologize, but I like it. Belonging is not about who you are, but whose you are. If you were to ask me who I am, you say, James, who are you? I'm probably going to start with what I do. I am a pastor. But if I want to get a little deeper than that, I might say I'm a husband. I am a father. I might even say that I'm a son. I might even tell you some of my qualities. I might even tell you some of my hobbies or things that I'm really good at. But all of those things about me don't mean anything apart from the relationships that make them true. It's not just about being a husband. It's whose husband am I? I'm Amanda's husband. It's not even about being a father. It's about whose father I am. I am Mia and Emily's daddy. I am Bob and Lisa's son. I am Rob, Kayla, Heather, and Magnus's brother. See, these relationships make those statements about me true. It's not about who I am. Could you imagine how ridiculous it would be if I said, I am a really great dad? Do you have kids? No. Could you imagine, like, I'm a great employee? Well, why can't you keep a job? I am an awesome Christian. What church do you go to? I don't go to church. You know, I thought it was funny. When I was growing up, I was thinking about this week. When I was growing up, when we talked about church, we talked about it in terms of, I belong to Bethany Lane Baptist Church. That's the church that I grew up in, I was saved at. My pastor is still there. I belonged to that church. Now I hear people talk more about what church I go to. I like the old way better. Because if you are a member at a church, you belong to that church. I want you to look to the person to your right, say, you belong to North Hills. All right, that was weak. Now I want you to look to the person on your left and say, you belong to North Hills. You see, it is about belonging. Where you belong is not about who you are, but whose you are. When Paul talked about this, he used some specific language. When he talked about the basis for who he is, he talked about it with respect to his relationship with Jesus. He says, why does he do all this? Because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Because Christ Jesus has made me his own. Paul didn't choose Jesus. I know sometimes we think about that, and that's kind of a crazy concept, but Paul was chosen by Jesus. When did Jesus choose Paul? When did Jesus make Paul his own? Was it when Paul got his life together? Was it when Paul started attending worship? Was it when Paul started tithing? When Paul developed a quiet time every day, when he could just come and be a part of, this relationship with God, getting right with God every day? No. Jesus made Paul his own when Paul was on his way to have some Christians arrested. You see, there are these events in our lives that change us. I'm always amazed that there's these big pivotal events in your life that when you experience them, it automatically changes you. You don't have to try to change, you just do. One of those I was thinking about was when I graduated high school. Like, my dad is like, okay, you can go to college or you can get a job, choose. Actually, there was a third option, you can get out. Then you graduate from, I went to college, I graduated from college. Well, I spent all this money on college, I better get a job. But then moving on down the line, I got married. That changes you. And if it doesn't change you immediately, then you're probably going to have some problems pretty early on in that marriage. Another big one that changed me was when Mia was born. I got a lot less sleep after that. But it changes you. When I saw that baby and I held Mia in my arms for the first time, I didn't think before that I could ever love anything that much. It changes you. It changes your behavior. Driving home from the hospital, it changed the way I drive. 2 hands on the wheel, 10 and 2, 10 to 15 miles under the speed limit. It changes you. But one thing that I think that we have to understand is that we will change our behavior to belong. And sometimes that will lead us to belong to things that are not good. We can be manipulated. When you think about a cult members will behave in such a way so that they can belong. Think about people like Charles Manson. Think about like David Koresh. We will behave in a way that is bad if it means that we can belong. So it's not just about who you belong to, but you have to belong to the right thing, which means we have to believe in the right thing. So that was thing 1. Now we get to thing 2. Thing 2 is believing. Believing is not about what you know, but who you know. Believing is not about what you know. I think that's wrong. Yeah, believing is not about what you know, but who you know. I don't know if you guys know this, but I know Steph Curry. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I know him. Steph Curry was born on March 13th, 1988. He was born in Akron, Ohio, but his dad was a member of the NBA, and they moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where his dad played for the Charlotte Hornets. He was a standout high school star, but a lot of the time they looked at him. He was smaller than the typical point guard that major colleges were looking at, so he felt really sad, but he went to Davidson instead of a big program. But he was an all-star at Davidson. He absolutely killed it there. He even had a little run in the March Madness tournament. So much so that he got some NBA attention, and the Golden State Warriors selected him number 7. And he went to the NBA, had a couple rough years, but then it all clicked, and the rest is history. Now, I have never met Steph Curry or hung out with him, but I know him, right? Some of you were like, you know Steph Curry? Some of you are like, I don't believe you. Here's the point. Knowing about somebody is not the same as knowing them. Just because I can list facts about Steph Curry does not mean that I know him. Knowing somebody involves more of an intimate relationship with them, where you actually spend time with that person, where you actually get to know what makes them tick, when you actually get to read cues off of their face, when you actually know when they're up, when they're down. It is a personal relationship. If I asked you to tell me about your wife and you just listed facts about her, I would question whether or not you knew her. Really. Believing is not about what you know, but who you know. You might be thinking, well, what does that have to do with believing? That's just a relationship. Well, believing is about relationships. If you are in a relationship with somebody, you're in that relationship because the two of you believe in that relationship. If you're married, this is easy. Most of the time, when we are married to one another, we believe in each other. At least that's the way it starts out. We believe that the other person has our best interest. We believe that that other person loves us. And we realize when one person stops believing in the marriage, that's when things go off track. When two people are friends and have been friends for a long time, we believe in each other. When you think about a sports team together, the teammates have to believe in one another. Show me a winning team and I'll show you teammates that believe in each other. Show me a losing team and I'll show you teammates that don't believe in each other. Soldiers in war depend on their fellow soldiers. They believe in each other. Relationships are about mutual belief. It's not about what you know, but it's about who you know. And not just facts about that person, but you genuinely know them. When you get into a relationship for the first time, there's kind of this give and take of figuring out somebody. Getting to know them, we say. Not getting to know about them, but getting to know them. Paul had this same situation with his relationship with God. Paul talked about not that I am already obtained this or am already perfect. Now I want you to think about this. Paul tells us in that little statement there, he tells us who he believes in. And he also tells us who he doesn't believe in. Now, in our lives, we are told that you need to believe in yourself. That you need to be really good at knowing who you are. Looking out for number one, you need to make sure that you are perfect, that you are somebody who doesn't make mistakes so that you can continue to belong. Paul is saying, it's not about me. I don't believe in myself. I believe in God. I believe in a God who accepts me as I am, who invites me to come as I am. Now, somebody, a famous pastor, a guy by the name of Perry Noble, said that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. We are invited to come to God as we are. We are invited to come and be accepted. We are not expected to be perfect, but we are expected to continue to grow. And when we think about our relationship with God, when we think about Paul's relationship with God, he says, not that I am already obtained this or am already perfect. You see, Paul is putting his faith in Jesus, saying, when I met Jesus, I was persecuting the church. I was doing all these bad things. I wanted to do good. I wanted to know God. You see, that's something we think sometimes. We think that just because somebody's behavior is bad, that they are trying to be bad. But when I was a little boy, I tried to be good, but as a little boy, I just did bad things. Paul really loved God. He really loved God. He was a really good rule follower. The problem was, Paul didn't know God. He didn't know Jesus until Jesus met him, made him his own on the road to Damascus. And from then on, Paul began to grow. Not for the sake of not making a mistake or faking it, but Paul eventually got to a point where he saw this relationship between himself and God as something that was working together. We don't grow and follow the rules so that we can be accepted by God. God already accepts us. I want you to get this in your mind. We're talking about this belief. Jesus believed in Paul before Paul believed in himself. And Jesus believed in Paul before Paul believed in Jesus. But once the two met, now we have two people who believe in the relationship and want to see it grow. And we believe in Jesus. That should affect the way that we live our lives. Does that mean that we're automatically going to be perfect? It doesn't. Does that mean that we're never going to make a mistake, that we're never going to turn our back on Jesus? It doesn't. But it does mean that we are expected to grow. Now, belonging is fun. It really is. There is nothing better than being a part of a group. To me, there's nothing worse than rejection, being alone. Being a part of a group is fun. Being a part of a church is fun. Being a part of a team is fun. Working at a company that you love and a job that you love is fun. And as a result, you come to believe in those relationships. Behavior is hard. It is hard to behave. It's hard to act a certain way. It's easy to make mistakes. It's easy to hurt people. Why is it that we always hurt the people that we love most? Or seem to? It's because it's hard to behave. It is very easy to misbehave, and sometimes it's actually fun to misbehave. But when we're talking about our behavior, we're not talking about what we do. We're talking about why we do it. You see, I can do all the good things that I can do, and I can have wrong motives. I can be really great at one thing, but want people to notice me. I can be generous with my money so that people look at me and think, oh man, he's generous. I can do all these things. It's not about what you do. It's about why you do it. When I was growing up, I would do things not necessarily because I liked to do them, but I would do them because I wanted to belong. About my story with band, I would put myself through misery in order to belong to something that I thought was worthwhile. But as you grow older, you begin to realize there's things in your life that are more important than just belonging. See, what I've found is you find some place that's worth belonging and then figure out how to behave. When it came to Paul talked about pressing on to making it his own. Paul said, but I press on to make it my own. Paul wasn't satisfied with just being in a relationship with Jesus. Paul was interested in pressing on and making this faith his own. Why? It had nothing to do with being this great person. It had nothing to do with people looking at him and saying, man, he's an awesome apostle, or being remembered in the history books as this great guy who would go around the world. No, Paul had one motivating factor that caused him to do the things that he did. To change from being this public enemy number one of the church, breathing down threats against the church, dragging people before the courts and having them thrown in jail or tortured, to all of a sudden being the number one supporter. This would be like going from playing for the Yankees, the dreaded Yankees, and then next year you're playing for the A's, the good team, the good guys. Paul pressed on to make his faith his own because he was motivated by love. Paul was motivated by the love that he had for Jesus and the love that Jesus had for him. You see, fear demands that we act a certain way. Fear demands that if you want to be accepted, then you have to behave. But love motivates us. Love motivates us to do crazy things. You know, we will do crazy things for the people we love. We will do crazy things to belong. And things that are worthwhile belonging. Think about your relationship at work. What are the things that you would do to keep your job? What are the things that you would do to get promoted? Think about your relationships with your spouse. What are you willing to do to keep that relationship healthy? I always think about my kids. If somebody tried to kidnap them, or did, what lengths would I go to get them back? Maybe make a phone call, talk about how I have special skills that help me track down people like them. I would do anything because love motivates you to do crazy things. Fear, it just gives you the bare minimum. You just do the bare minimum and, as long as there's no repercussions, that's what we do. But love causes us to go above and beyond. Love causes us to do crazy things for that relationship. I want you to think about this. This one thing. What's that one thing? Well, that one thing is this. It's all about our relationships. Love motivates us to protect our relationships. Good behavior. It's not about just being good for the sake of being good, but it's about protecting those relationships. We are good because we want to keep our job. We're good because we love our spouse. We're good because we love our kids. We don't want these relationships to be negatively affected. If you look out in the world, you think, well, our entire judicial system is based on fear. But I don't go rob banks because I'm afraid of getting caught. I don't rob banks because I'm afraid of getting caught and then being separated from the people that love me, the people that I love and that depend on me. Good behavior protects our relationships, which means we have to be selfless. We have to give up a little bit of our freedom in order to keep our relationships healthy. We can't just do whatever we want because that's prideful and selfish, and other people will look at us like we are selfish and prideful, and that damages our relationships. But then let's think about our relationship with God, our relationship with Jesus. When we are loved by God, when we are loved by Jesus, what will that motivate us to do? When we recognize that Jesus came to the earth, God in the flesh, died on a cross to pay the penalty for our mistakes, even though he didn't sin, so that we can have an eternal relationship with him, then our idea of God is no longer a motivation to do things because we're afraid of him. We're afraid that he's going to punish us. But it's motivated by our love for him. We do not worship an angry God who is waiting to punish us. We worship a God that has already demonstrated his love for us. Therefore, we should be motivated by that love. This couple weeks ago, a group from our church, motivated by love, decided to go on a mission trip to the Philippines. And I'm going to invite Joel Ng up here now because he's going to tell us a little bit about his trip with them. And I'm going to interview him. And I'm going to ask him some questions, and he's going to talk about that. Where's your mic from earlier? All right.
Check.
So Joel, you went on a mission trip to the Philippines with the Katevis family and Levi. You took off 2 weeks of work. 3 weeks of work that you weren't paid for. So
Nope.
It wasn't vacation.
Nope.
And then you went halfway around the world. How long did it take you to get there?
It took us about 24 to 28 hours.
So a full day just to get there before you're even doing ministry. Did they give you a nap when you got there?
Well, I was able to catch a few Z's on the way over, but it was not very comfortable. And the whole expression, traveling mercies, when people pray about it, that's when I really got the gist of that prayer, because on a 30-minute commute to work, it's not very uncomfortable, but getting there was a challenge.
So why would you do that? It seems crazy to me. I mean, it doesn't really seem crazy to me, but for the sake of somebody who maybe doesn't know Jesus, or maybe they've never done anything like that before, it might seem crazy. Can you tell us why you did that?
Well, to start off, I didn't feel like it was very crazy until I actually went. I was thinking that it was going to be maybe a 13-hour flight, and that was it. But it was about 15 extra hours. But what really motivated me to go was the love of God within me. I wanted to share it with others. And the experiences that Lauren, Jarrell, and Lindsay have shared with me. And it really encouraged me to see what Taleb was all about, and to also share the love of Christ with the kids in the Upward Ministries that we did over there.
So, the Upward Ministries. So you went over there to lead an Upward ministry. What led you to take Upward over there?
Well, I've pretty much coached almost every season here, so I felt that I was properly equipped with the experience here of sharing the gospel with the teams that I've coached and coaching in general.
So you would say that Upward has been such an amazing part of your life and ministry here that you felt a sense of belonging to Upward and to North Hills, and you wanted to take that over.
Yes.
Now, you went with a family of 4, plus Levi. What's that like, being on a trip like that with the family dynamics of another group? Did you feel like they're like a family and you and Levi were kind of on the outside? Like, what was that like?
I actually didn't think about it until I got back, but I've been serving in the youth ministry with the Katevis family and the Levi for about 5 years. So it felt like another conference trip that we've taken in the past. So I felt like family, didn't feel like I was being treated like a child. Felt like I was treated like a fellow leader. And
so they didn't have like family time and say, hey, you and Levi go do your thing, we're going to do family time?
No way.
They invited you into their family?
Well, it wasn't that we were invited, it's just we felt immediately part of the family as we were there. There weren't any times where we felt like we were out of place, or I felt out of place. Can't speak for Levi. But I'm pretty sure he felt the same way.
Now, you told me that you got to play Levi's nurse a little bit?
Yes. He was sick during the trip, and he avulsed his finger, and I was there to make sure he drank more water than he was drinking and to tape his finger up so he could continue to play basketball.
So that's basically like a big brother right there.
Yes. I also made sure he would get up out of bed so he could have breakfast.
I'm sure his mom understands. So tell me a little bit about how your beliefs went into this trip. What about your belief in Jesus, or your belief in the importance of going, or the importance of going on a trip like this? How did that affect your decision to go?
I felt that it was my responsibility, not necessarily to go across the globe or halfway across the world, to do it because we could do it right outside our front door. But it felt like it was an opportunity that I was given. Pretty much God set everything into place. I'm still considered a trainee at work, so my supervisor could have told me that, no, you can't take this time off work. And God was provided and allowed me to save up enough money to pay off bills while I was gone. So it felt like God just led me in this direction.
Do you think that this is like something you would do again, or have you checked off your missionary trip? Like, is this your pilgrimage? You're done, never going again?
Well, I want to go back again. It definitely didn't feel like a vacation, but I would rather do a mission trip versus a vacation because I was able to develop relationships with people that are also believers.
Do you think that you're special, that you got a special anointing for this, or is it like something, should everybody do this, or is it just something that a select few that feel called should do, or what do you think?
I'm no way more special than anyone else here. I think everybody should go, maybe not to the Philippines, but somewhere, and share the good news.
Why?
It's part of the Great Commission.
Ooh. So we as Christians are called to make disciples of all nations, which involves going across the world, or maybe just across the street. So were there any cultural differences while you were there? Like any behavior things that you were like, man, I am not in Kansas anymore?
I think the biggest thing that was very different that I didn't particularly like was that they wouldn't eat with us. Since we were, quote-unquote, honored guests, they would allow us to eat first, and then they would eat after we ate, which pretty much took out maybe close to 4 hours out of a whole day due to meals being taken separately. That took away from fellowship, essentially, I feel, given our Baptist American tradition of fellowshipping while eating.
Around the Lord's table, perhaps.
Yep.
So, how was the food?
I like Filipino food, so I enjoyed almost every single meal.
Awesome.
Well, every single meal, not almost.
So how has your experience on this particular trip, how has that motivated you and your behavior, not just in the Philippines, but how has it motivated you to live differently now that you're back?
I don't think it's about living differently because of the experiences that those who've gone before me have shared with me. They've helped me to develop a sense of gratefulness for the things that we have here. So when I went there, I didn't get the sense of being ungrateful for the things I already have here because they've helped me to get to that point before going. But the thing that has changed within me mentally is that everybody experiences something different. Everyone has a different walk with God. Because part of my idea was that I was going to experience something similar to what they experienced. But I'm not Q, I'm not Alien, I'm not Jarrell, I'm not Lindsay, I'm not Lauren. So what they experience is different from what I experienced.
Awesome. Well, thank you from all of us at North Hills. Thank you for using your gifts. Thank you for answering the call to go. And just thank you for being obedient to Christ and surrendering yourself to Him.
And I would also like to say thank you for those who've been tithing for the missions a day and the Philippine missions, because you guys were the ones who funded my trip over there.
Awesome.
And thank you for the prayers, especially 15 days or 17 days surrounded by believers was a real blessing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Love motivates better than fear. Love motivates us to do crazy things for God. When we know that we love God and we know that we're loved by God, it causes us to make sacrifices, to go on mission trips, to be generous with our money, to give to things like $1 a day for missions. It causes us to get outside of our comfort zone. When we're motivated by love, we go above and beyond. When we're motivated by fear, we just try to keep the rules. But God doesn't want us to just keep the rules. In fact, God is okay if you break some of the rules if you're motivated by love. What will motivate you? What will your love for God motivate you to do? What will your love for your spouse motivate you to do? What will your love for your job? You know, I've always found that when you love the work that you do or the people that you work with or the people that you work for, you are much more productive. What will our love for people and those relationships motivate us to do? What are we willing to sacrifice of ourselves to make sure those relationships are healthy? What will we do? That's always the question that we come to at the end of as a message. What will this motivate us to do? We know that we are loved by God. We know that we have a relationship with Him if we have believed in the sacrifice that His Son made on a cross. But what is that going to motivate us to do? Is it just going to motivate us to come to church on Sunday? Is it just going to motivate us to go to church? Is it just going to motivate us to give up a little bit of sleep? Maybe to drop a little bit of money in the offering plate at the end, to check that off of our list? What will it motivate us to do? Because that's just the bare minimum. God wants you to be motivated to go above and beyond. God just doesn't want a little bit. He wants all of you. But it takes love. It doesn't take following the rules. It takes all of it. We don't have to worry about belonging. We don't have to worry about if we mess up and we break the rules that we're not going to be able to belong anymore. God already took care of that on the cross. We are belongers. We belong to North Hills. We belong to the body of Christ. We believe in Jesus. We believe in this relationship that we have with Him. But how is that going to affect what we do? How will that motivate us? Before us now we have the Lord's Supper. And we think about what that means. It's about, we call it the Lord's table. Well, what is a table? It's like kind of when you have a dinner table, when all the family comes around and pulls up a chair and has a plate, and they eat together and they talk together and they enjoy one another's company, where they come to know one another. That's what the Lord's table is for the church. We gather around the table because we belong to the body of Christ. We believe in the power of Jesus' resurrection. It's a behavior that we do. It's a behavior that we come together to remember what Jesus did for us. So as we go into this time of reflection, the lights will come down. There'll be some soft music. What will love motivate you to do? Think about your relationship with your spouse. Think about your relationship with your kids, your job. What will your love for them and those relationships motivate you to do? And think about your relationship with God. What Christ has done for us should motivate us. What will it motivate you to do? As we enter this time of reflection, reflect on that. And after a few minutes, Pastor Bill will come up and we will partake in the Lord's Supper.